which we meet, the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation. Pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And welcome all First Nations people here. And note that this land was never ceded. So, what a week it's been. Kylie's here, who would have thought? Were many of you at the launch last weekend? Oh yes, it was a great day. Kylie, it was a great launch. I thought it went very well. How did you feel about it?
Hi, how are you going, Lex? Lovely. And thank you, firstly, everybody, for coming here this afternoon. It's a lovely thing for me to be able to come and spend an hour with you on a Sunday afternoon. So thank you for giving up your time today. My impression of the launch last Sunday is best described by, I was just blown away. Quite literally. So I'm a mum of three. For those who don't know, I have a 19-year-old son, a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And I thought I had everything in control. I'd been really clear about what time we needed to leave the house. I had my mum and dad there. It was all very well planned. And of course, bang on the time I was supposed to leave, my son was still in bed. The 19-year-old hadn't even gotten up. And I'm sure there are many people in this room that has had that experience. So I ended up leaving the house without my family. And so I want to share that with you because just to give you an idea of where my headspace was, right? So I show up early. The team asked me to take a seat inside the clubhouse so that I could go through my speech. And then all of a sudden they're banging on the door saying, we're starting. And I'm going, I don't even know if my family's here. You know, they managed to get here. And so I'm walking out the door desperately trying to text my kids going, are you here? Did your brother get up? Are you here? And then I sort of got to the edge of the green and I looked up and it was just a sea of pink. Like there were just people next to people, behind people, in front of people. And I think in that moment, for me, I just was so incredibly moved and incredibly humbled. And it really felt to me like, this is it. Like, this is what we've been trying to do. And because I think, Lex, you know, I would never, I'm not the sort of person who would have woken up one morning and gone, I'm going to go into politics because that's what I should do. It's not how I'm wired. I'm running as an independent because a group of people saw an opportunity to change the system from the inside, and a friend mentioned my name to them and they called me and asked me if I'd ever considered entering politics, and eventually asked me if I would run as their candidate. And when I said yes, not because I thought, or even to this day think I have all the answers or I have any sense of grandeur. I said yes because I could see there was a community that wanted to be heard. And I do my best work when I am speaking and advocating for other people. It's what I've done for 35 years. So to answer your question, last Sunday I walked out and I saw our community and I just thought, we're going to do this. We are going to be the change our country needs us to be.
It felt like the campaign really has a lot of momentum going, and I guess the challenge is to maintain that momentum and convert more to the cause. What was in your background stands you in good stead to run to suddenly in the position you find yourself as independent candidate for North Sydney? What's your background that has led you to think, yeah, I'll give this a go?
I think it's a combination of things, to be honest. I mean, firstly, the way I was raised. You know, my parents, I'm the eldest of 4 kids born in a small country town called Coonabarabra, now in northwest New South Wales. And like any small community, and I'm sure many of you here have experienced it, it was very much a place that if something needed to be done or somebody needed help, you just did it. You stepped up, you helped out. And it was never about what was in it for you. You know, it was just the right thing to do. So I came from that place from a very young stage. My parents had nothing. My mum was only 17 when she had me. She was very young. I think they had 20 pounds between them. So I came from a very ordinary home background, but my first jobs when I started working then, so I trained in communications, and the first few jobs I had were all advocacy roles. So I was advocating for people who'd experienced traumatic brain injury, and then I was advocating for greater safety for kids at home. Then I was advocating for people who, in the early days of HIV/AIDS, had been diagnosed and couldn't get treatment. And I just sort of fell into this role in my life where if there was a conversation that needed to be driven and an outcome that needed to be fought for, it was what I did really well. And I think that's what has brought me to the place I am today and running as an independent. And I think it's why I actually am a really good candidate for this role, because what I do best is when I'm sent to argue for something that I believe is right, I will argue like I know I'm right with no room to move. But the trick to it is I listen like I know I'm wrong. So that if I learn something, that means I need to flex my position or take on board new pieces of information, I'm able to do that. And I think that means, you know, I bring people to a place of consensus and a positive way forward. So, you know, I think more often in my life, if I mean, I'm sure every parent knows the most common word their kid hears is no, right? Well, for me, I think professionally, the most common phrases I've heard is, you can't do it that way, or that's not going to work, you know, and I just get an absolute buzz out of the fact that every time I've heard those phrases to date, I've been able to turn around and prove those people wrong and have been able to make a difference.
Now, this is purely anecdotal, but as a long-time resident of this electorate, I'm sensing people are restless and they want a change. As I say, it's purely anecdotal, but I've been encouraged by the election of an independent as mayor, Zoe Baker. Larissa Penn did an amazing job in Willoughby. Absolutely, it was fantastic. What have you taken from, I mean, Larissa got so close, but there must have been some huge positives that you can take out of her campaign and Zoe Baker's campaign. What have you learned from those?
I think it's what you just said, Lex. You know, people want to have a voice at the table. You know, like when you look at the community that is the federal seat of North Sydney, and when we talk particularly about Willoughby, I mean, this is a community that we are the thinkers, the feelers, the doers, you know, we're the believers, we're the achievers, and we are the leaders. And I think when you have a community like that, it's nonsensical to not find a way to enable that community to have a voice in the decisions that are being made around it. But as it currently stands, in a two-party political system, we don't get a voice. You know, we vote somebody in from either of the major parties because we like them. You know, we think they look like good people. When we talk to them, they talk in a way that we think resonates with us. Yet the reality is when they then get to Canberra and they start voting, they have to vote the way their party wants them to vote, and all of a sudden our opinions become secondary. And I don't think this is just a thing that we're seeing in North Sydney. I think this is globally. People are waking up and really starting to recognise that as voters we have both an opportunity but also a responsibility to play an active role in our democracy, and just sort of sitting there as a passenger and maybe lamenting what's going on really doesn't do anybody justice. In the case of, you know, I think in the case of the campaign most recently in the Willoughby by-election, I think there are a number of things that, you know, combined around that outcome. I think it's extraordinary credit to our community that a number of candidates stood up on very short notice, including Larissa, and, you know, and those people stood up because they believed we needed more than one option from the incumbent party. And I think what you saw in Larissa and everybody else that ran was that they were focused on issues that they knew weren't being discussed. And Larissa has been a long-term stalwart, as we all know, around the tunnels, particularly the Beaches Link tunnel. And the irony is, and I guess the sad thing is, if it had actually been compulsory voting 1 through to 6, I think we would have seen Larissa get home. I think she would have won. But the fact that it was actually a lot of people only put a 1 in a box and then all the preferential flow through was lost meant that the Liberal Party person just pulled ahead of her. So at the end, I think probably everyone in this room knows, but at the end of polling day, there was only 130 votes between Larissa and the Liberal Party candidate. And what I'm sure it's not bad for me to say this, but when you look at what happened basically is it was a 3-week campaign, that got sprung on us. 2-week campaign that got sprung on us as a community. The voting envelopes got sent out to houses, and what we can see is that actually the very early votes that were returned, so in that first few days after those voting envelopes went out and got sent back, they just came back with the number 1 Liberal, and that was it. So it was very much a kind of there hadn't been time to get awareness out there of other candidates. So we're in a different position for this federal election, and I think we need to make the most of that as a community if we want to see a change.
So the federal election is optional preferential as well. How are you going to deal with preferences? Yeah,
so I think what's really important, it's compulsory, I think, isn't it? The federal? Mandatory. Yeah. So as an independent, I'm not going to be instructing people on how to list their preferences. I think it's, from my perspective, I respect the people of my electorate, and I actually honestly believe that you guys do have some very clear thoughts on how you would like your voting to be allocated. What I am going to ask is for everybody's number 1. I think if we want to see a change, the best way to get that change is to turn this seat independent. And but beyond that, your numbers 2, 3 through to 6 are yours to place as you see fit. So that's my kind of, and to think about it though, to be clever in the voting. I think as time moves on, I think it will come down to a decision about what we want to see our seat be for the long term. And I guess I would say to the community and, to everyone here tonight, my intention is that we turn North Sydney independent and that we hold North Sydney independent for the next 12 years. This is not a flash in a pan. It's not a protest vote. I think this is about us standing up and actually taking our rightful place in the national discussion on what's happening with politics. And the only way we can do that is as an independent voice.
Okay. You've been doing a lot of listening. What are you hearing? What are the red button issues for you?
Yeah, it's actually, so I launched in September last year, so it's been about 5 months that I've had the opportunity to just get out and talk to people and listen to people. Without a doubt, number 1 is climate. So it's that sheer frustration and sense of why are we not moving when the science is so clearly on the side of us needing to move quickly to transition both our country but also the role we play in the world. Number 2 has been around integrity. So why is it that we see the behaviour that happens at our federal level tolerated with little consequence, and is that the sort of behaviour that we believe is befitting of our nation? Number 3 is actually our economy. Which way is it headed? Are we going to continue to be a place that just digs for the future for our kids, or are we going to innovate and return manufacturing to our shores? And then number 4 is equality, and that's the issues of gender equality. It's the issue of a true First Nations voice in our constitution in Australia, and importantly, it's how we treat people who are seeking asylum in our country. So they're the kind of 4 macro themes, and depending on who I'm speaking to, they'll flip in order, but without fail, they're the 4 things that come up every time.
Okay. I'm happy to open it up to the floor for questions. If you have anything specific you'd like to ask Kylie, please. What? So yes, there's a gentleman up the back there.
Yes, you do. No, you do because it's recorded.
Hi, Kylie. Good luck with all of this pursuit. Mark Croom, Castle Craig Conservation Society President. Is that better? Yes. My apologies. Mark Croom, Castle Craig Conservation Society President. It was said to me recently, just when I chat with a neighbour in the street, president of a tennis club, he said that Australians tend to vote governments out rather than vote candidates in. How can we swing that around, do you think, to reach people who want you rather than don't want the opposition?
That's such a great question. And I'm not a politician. So, I think, and as I said before, I never saw myself entering politics, to be honest. So all I can do is hypothesise around the best way for that to take place, and I think it's about conversations. I think we sincerely need to engage people in conversations around what sort of country they want to see us be, not just in the next 3 years, but in the next decade and the 15 years beyond. For me, I honestly feel that one of the biggest shames in our society is that we feel, or I don't know, I'm going to speak for myself. I want our federal government to lead us to a better place. I want our federal government to let my kids know that there is an optimistic and hopeful future ahead for them. And I want our federal government to hold itself to a higher standard than any other organisation in the country, because I believe that's what we deserve as a nation. And I believe that when we are called to be better and we have examples that model being better, we rise to it. And I think our federal government should be a force that enables us to rise. And I think if you have people that are voting because they just want to get rid of something, like they're dissatisfied with it, I'm just getting rid of it, that's a very negative, that's just taking the trash out. I don't want to take the trash out. I actually fundamentally want us to shape up to a better future and mature into ourselves as a country and decide who we want to be in the next, as I've said, the next 10, 15, 25 years.
I'm Arthur Chesterfield Evans. I'm a doctor that campaigned against tobacco for 20 years. I'm now just working in general medicine. Are you aware that when Medicare was initiated, it was 85% of the most common fee, the AMA fee? It's now about 45%. It's been raised at half the inflation rate for 32 years, I think it is. And all the major parties say is that they will save Medicare. They're basically starving it to death. The doctors won't use it in most cases, and it's just used for patients who weren't going to pay. Will you fix Medicare such that the doctors are paid so they'll actually use it, and we will actually have a universal free health system?
Thank you for the question. And may I are you the Arthur Chesterfield Evans who ran as an independent? Thank you. I just want to say thank you for running as an independent when you ran as an independent. To answer your question, actually, so a large portion of my life has been spent in healthcare advocacy, healthcare communications, and I couldn't agree with you more in terms of we had just running our current system into the ground. I actually happen to know for a fact there was a review of all the Medicare item numbers that were done coming out of the end of 2019, 2020. That review has been provided to the Health Ministry. Just an energy sucker this afternoon. So I have actually, last Sunday gave me the opportunity to put some meat around the bones of what were our key policy priority areas, and health kept coming up. We need our health system to be returned to a place where there is integrity and sustainability and reliability. Fundamental to that is the role of the Medicare system across the platform. What is reimbursed? How's it reimbursed? What's the dollar value invested in it? And also, there was something else I was going to say to you. So it's things like the National Preventative Health Strategy actually being executed. Again, that's something that's been developed. It just hasn't been given the nod and it's not been resourced appropriately. It is the role of bringing through the review of the Medicare item numbers and making sure that those item numbers are appropriate and that we are moving forward. And most importantly is the recognition that COVID has knocked our community for 6 in the last 2 years. But the reality is any sane person can see, while we've been dealing with COVID, we've created a massive backlog of other health issues. So whether that's women who've missed their mammograms, people who've not had the support they needed for mental health, colon screening, skin screening, and actually so fundamental in my policy platform is that I'll call on the federal government to actually lead us out of this with a plan that focuses on coordinating across the states and enabling GPs to get more hands-on in helping us close this backlog by introducing a specific Medicare number, which is about the health catch-up window. So I think it's something I've heard a lot of conversation about. The final thing I would say, though, Arthur, is that I think what's really important about the way our government approaches health is that we need to depoliticise it, and we need to turn back to the experts and take their lead and take their advice on what we need to be doing. And I think health, like many other subjects across our country, has become a bit of a political handball, and I think that's a disservice to our community and to those trying to work within it. So I want to see our health services rebuilt, and I want to see the politics get taken out of it so that our country can move forward from strength to strength.
I'm Robert Samuel. I'm an independent councillor on Willoughby City Council. At a local level, independents are involved in government, and I'm just wondering what your view is of the role of independents in government in Canberra.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being a local councillor. I think I was trying to describe to my kids the other day where independents fit in the political system, and the best way I would describe it is I kind of feel like if you're in a schoolyard and there were 2 gangs standing on either side of the schoolyard and that keep on sort of fronting up to each other and chesting up to each other, the independents are the people that walk into the middle of that and go, okay, hang on you two, like, let's just have a sensible conversation, or, let's put down the egos, put aside the win-lose scenario and come back to true consensus building. I think this is just something generally for our community, and I hope so. There is an amazing independent female called Helen Haynes who represents Indi out of Victoria. And Helen worked with an extraordinary group of Australians to create a proposed legislative framework for a Federal Integrity Commission. That legislation is world class. It is actually, honestly, incredible. And I've heard that from High Court judges, both current and past. I've heard it from people internationally. What fascinates me is that Helen has brought that legislation forward not once, twice, and then once into the Senate, and each time it's been pushed back out because it didn't come from within the Liberal or the Labor Party. So, and when I've actually spoken, so the Liberal Party don't want it at all. So I think we can, that's a completely different conversation. But even with the Labor Party, I recently reached out and said, I don't get it. Why not just come out and say we will adopt the legislative reform as put forward by Helen? And the response I got back was, well, because we've got to own it. I'm like, well, that's nonsensical. Why? Why? Which is probably my other favourite question. Why? Somebody else has done the work, the legislation's ready to go. Put your ego down and let's just get on and get it done. 3 more independents on the crossbench so that we end up with a crossbench of sort of 7 we can change the way conversations happen in that parliamentary house, because they're going to have to bring those debates back into the parliamentary house to get consensus. So that's the aim in this election, is just to get enough people into that house to bring conversation back into it. And then honestly, my hope is that we just go from strength to strength, and, you know, who says we can't have an entire parliament made up of independents whose focus is on their community desires, and then actually putting aside their egos and working to a point of consensus for the best place for our country to move forward. Yeah, great question, Hugh. So I'm not sure if everybody heard that, so I'll just repeat it. So basically, Hugh's question of me was that when he first heard about me and I first launched, it was very clear that I was coming out running on a platform for climate change and faster action on climate. And then as time has gone on and assets have been launched around the campaign, what we've started to see is that it will be Kylea Tink. There is Kylea Tink for the climate out there, so it is online and it is in print ads, but then we also have Kylea Tink for the economy and Kylea Tink for the community. I want to answer this in a couple of ways. So first, the reason I'm running as an independent is because for the last 2 years, I've worked with vulnerable young Australians who are at risk of youth suicide or have experienced increasing rates of self-harm. And the work that the organisations I was working with were doing was phenomenal. Brilliant, brilliant work. But it hit me like a ton of lead bricks one day. It wouldn't matter how hard I or anybody else worked to support young Australians if fundamentally we are sending our planet down the drain hole. And so I stood back and went, okay, the issue we've got to fix here is the way we are dealing with our natural resources and what we are doing with our environment. So I want it to be really, really clear. My first two priorities are Australia needs to commit to higher carbon reduction rates faster. So my proposal is that we're at least 50 to 60% by 2030 and that we're net zero by 2040. I don't even want to entertain a conversation about net zero by 2050 because there's no ladder to get there, there's no plan laying it down, and quite frankly the people who are trying to sell us on net zero by 2050 won't even be here to be answerable for it. So I think we need to focus on what we can do in our own lifetime and within our own areas of responsibility. So that's number one. Second thing is I think our community should lead the country, and I know we can. Having had conversations now for 5 months with people who work in economics, who work in climate science, who work in the businesses across our electorate that are focused on sustainable and renewable energy, we can be the federal seat of North Sydney, which runs from Gladesville all the way around Hunters Hill, comes all the way out around Longueville, Lane Cove, comes back through Willoughby, takes in Waverton, Crow's Nest, Northbridge, Camaray, goes all the way back around through Middle Cove and then out through. We can be one of the first true net zero urban zones in this country, and we can actually give that a red hot go by 2030. One community battery is not going to do it, but a full systemic review of how we're working. And this is where I take my hat off to the councils, and this is where I think the opportunity is. I know we already have 2 councils. We have the Lane Cove Council, we have the North Sydney Council. I know the Willoughby Council's looking at. These councils are already working on initiatives to move our communities forward to net zero as quickly as we can. So my idea and my understanding of my responsibility as your federal representative would be to work with local councils, the state government and the federal government to get us there faster, to make sure that we're doing the projects and the programs that we need to do to set up a framework for our kids going forward. So to your other question, why, when you look at how I'm trying to communicate to people, the really interesting thing is, Hugh, people moved very quickly towards this campaign when they understood that what I've just voiced to you is one of my primary ambitions. I'm now trying to move people on the edges of our campaign. And so those people need to also have faith and trust me to be responsible economically, and they need to be able to trust and understand that honestly, and actually this is really important, and I really want you guys to understand this. I honestly am not running because I think I have the answers. I don't. I really don't. I'm not an expert on climate. I'm not an expert on economics. I'm not an expert on healthcare. But what I am really bloody good at is listening to people that are smarter than me, taking on board that information and then fighting for what I know is right. So that's my job for this community. And I'm just, by talking about those other things, I'm trying to invite other people in to our conversation, because the louder our voice is, the less likely it is that we'll be ignored.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
How would you vote on the Andrew Wilkie bill to end indefinite detention? That's the first one. And may I ask you how you voted in the last 3 previous elections?
No, great question on the second one. I'm really going to have to think hard about that, because I've got 3 kids under 19, so I can actually say the last 9 years have been a bit blurry at times. As to Andrew Wilkie's legislative reform, I'm a big supporter of that, and in fact when you look at our policy position that we announced last Sunday, if elected, I understand that if North Sydney sends me to Canberra as your representative, you want me to demand that all of those that have been deemed refugees that are still being held in indefinite asylum detention be released immediately. So I'll be doing that. Just by way of background on me, for you may not know, but I ran the McGrath Foundation, a breast cancer charity, for 6 years. I knew Jane before she passed away, and I didn't mean to go into the not-for-profit space. I went in to organise Jane's funeral, and I ended up staying for 6 years because I could see there were Australian families who were experiencing breast cancer who simply weren't getting the help they needed, so I stayed. The reason I tell you that is because when I came out of that campaign, I took some time off until about August that year when my name got mentioned at a barbecue, and a group of people approached me about launching a campaign to get children out of immigration detention centres. So we rallied together as a group of individuals, we funded it ourselves, we reached out to all of the existing NGOs in the area, and we launched a campaign called We're Better Than This Australia. And we mobilised about 120 people of profile from across our community, so people like Brian Brown, Claudia Carvin, Georgie Gregan, we had captains of industry, and we called on the government to let those kids out of those centres. We got 750 children out of the immigration detention centres by January that year. So we know it can be done. I think what is really important, and this is where we know the independent voice carries the greatest weight, because we saw what Karen Phelps was able to do. The legislation Karen Phelps had passed in her time as the member for Wentworth is the fastest piece of legislative reform that's ever been turned around in that House. Unfortunately, she lost her seat in the election subsequently, and the legislation was overturned. But what is clear is that this is an area that neither of the major parties are prepared to move on, because both of them are culpable in the creation of the system we currently have. So we need independents to go in and call sanity back into that room around how these people are being dealt with. And more importantly, we need to decide who we are going to be, as a number of people seeking asylum is likely to skyrocket in the next 12 to 18 months. We still have people trying to get out of Afghanistan. We now have the issue going on with Russia. So we have to be prepared. What is Australia's role in this current global environment? And as it currently stands, we have the lowest intake rate of people seeking asylum that we've had as a nation for 50 years. And last year we didn't even hit that target. So we are not carrying our weight as a nation. And I think that that's a conversation, again, that we need to hold our government to account to have. Oh, and my voting record. So let me think about this. I know I voted Liberal when Malcolm Turnbull was the candidate for Prime Minister. I had a lot of hope when it came to Malcolm Turnbull. I think, who was before him? I can't even remember. Oh, I don't think I would have voted for Tony Abbott. So I can't remember what I did for that one. And in the last one I did, I have to confess, I voted Labor. But I didn't, so most of my life, what I need to own is most of my life I've been a Liberal voter. I was raised in a family that was small business oriented, and my understanding of Liberal Party politics is that it was the party you voted for if you wanted good economic management. I think what I've come to recognise is that's simply not the case. We currently have a government in place that are making really wasteful economic decisions, and so that kind of veil was lifted for me, particularly in this last 3 years, which is why why I'm running as an independent. I've never been a member of a party. I should make that very clear. And I think that's it. I'll be voting independent this election.
Hi, Kylie. I'm Dr. Bibiana Chen. I'm a mental health researcher for many years, and coming from a lived experience of clinical depression myself. And I supported my friend Larissa Pan for the last, not this one, the previous election, handing out how to vote flyers to fellow Chinese-speaking, Mandarin-speaking voters. And I notice here, looks like I am a minority, and please excuse my accent. I speak English as a second language, and I was born in Hong Kong, and a lot of people from similar background, they live in Chatswood and in this electorate. So I would like to ask you, how are you reaching out to people similar to my background? And I also is very aware that on Facebook, on WhatsApp, a lot of Chinese who are quite politically active, they have photos invited to a reception with Scott Morrison recently. And I have been invited to one of those receptions in 2005 when I first started as a PhD student at the Black Dog Institute. So I understand that they're very aggressive. And coming from a Chinese background, I know that Chinese are very sensitive to the status quo. So this is just some of my thinking about how to actually reach out to people who are not someone who will typically come. And excuse me, my pink T-shirt is in the laundry, so otherwise I would have put it on. Thank you.
So firstly, thank you for being here today. I think everyone in this room would, probably, one of the things I love about our seat is actually that we are a vibrant and diverse community. So 25% of the people that live in our electorate will actually have a background from China. So it's a very strong and important community. My personal approach has been to try and respectfully reach in. So rather than me just sit here like some sort of mountain waiting for Muhammad to come, we've been working really hard to go to the community. So we've recently been doing materials in both traditional Chinese and also modern Chinese, because I understand in written there's two forms. We have an inclusion and diversity team who's here? Jocelyn's here. So who are working really hard to make sure that I'm sensitive and aware of, how I need to be relating. And it's just a constant process of meeting people and trying to invite them in. So I think what's really important in a lot of conversations that I've had, I had a conversation yesterday actually with a gentleman and his daughter on High Street. They were Hong Kong Chinese, so dad was Hong Kong Chinese, daughter was very much Australian. And his comment to me was, are you going to be focused on fear in the same way that our current politicians are focused on fear? And my honest answer to him was absolutely not, because the reality is we as a community embrace everybody who lives here, and we are stronger when we do so. So I actually think it's, when you see a government reach for fear in the way this current government is doing so, I really think we need to take a very cynical eye to them, because in many ways I think that's designed to make us cower and perhaps be more timid to take the brave step, which is telling them we don't want them anymore. So yeah, I tend to be of the mindset that we need to embrace everybody across our community and then take our voice forward. And I'd welcome any advice, and I love that you've got a Team Tink t-shirt. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ian. Do you, in talking to people out on the streets, hear concerns about the housing affordability crisis? And if so, do you rate that as sort of one of the top sort of 5 or 6 issues? And what sort of policies would you consider are appropriate to try and deal with this crisis?
I definitely hear it, like people definitely raise it with me, and perhaps not surprisingly it's younger people who live within our electorate who raise it with me. I don't have an answer for it, I'm not going to pretend I do, but I think it is something that we need to address as a community. I did have somebody say to me quite recently that actually the federal seat of North Sydney is not carrying its weight as far as building new residences is concerned. So apparently across the Sydney basin at the moment, we're about 50,000 new properties short for how many that are actually required. And the 2 belts that are not coming to the party and carrying the weight are the Lower North Shore and then the eastern suburbs. So there is no doubt that people are looking to us to play the role that we need to play in making sure that there's enough housing for people. I think it's a conversation we're going to have as a community, because we live in a very interesting environment where I'm sure, I don't mean to be rude, but can I see how many house owners are in this room at the moment? Or mortgage, if you've got a, yeah, so the majority of us are currently house owners. And so there is a little bit of a responsibility that then comes back to us in terms of planning. What are we doing with our asset in the longer term, and is our home in a place which is likely to be acquired for medium density housing going forward? Because I think the reality is more people want to live in this area now than can live in a 600 square metre block on one house. So I know there's some really interesting, I had a fantastic conversation last Thursday with somebody who is very passionate about design, and he was talking to me about innovation in design in terms of how you can create houses that actually are livable for 2 or 3 generations of the one family. So I don't know if that's going to make some of you cringe, but I did, coming out today, my son, sorry, we digress, my 19-year-old son was giving me a bit of stick, and so he walked away from me and I responded to him by saying, "And when are you moving out?" And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "When are you moving out?" So I think that, you know, it's a big question, is the short answer, and I wish I had a very clear answer for you. I don't, but we are going to have to face up to it because we want our children to be able to get a start, yeah? And we'd like them to be able to stay close, just probably not in the upstairs bedroom in my case.
Hello, Kylie. I'd like to ask your stance, please, as a potentially federally elected member of the seat of North Sydney on the Beaches Link Tunnel. Now, people might think this is a parochial issue or even a state government issue. In fact, it's also a federal issue because I understand it's going to attract federal funding. This, in turn, feeds back into one of the things you've been talking about, and that is climate change. The dig site or the excavation site is in Flat Rock Gully, which is Northbridge, Narrabeen, Camaray. Destruction of acres and acres of land, thousands and thousands of trees. All of this feeding back into the climate change factor, as well as the release of toxins and heaven only knows what else is there. What, as a federal election person, would be your stance?
So, thank you for that. A subject close to my heart, the desecration of Camaray and Narrabeen. No, it's up to you. What are you going to do about it?
No, well, Lex is a very strong advocate around this space too, is why I thought you might like to speak before me. But just to be really clear, I actually think I'm in line with North Sydney Council's recent call. I think all work on both the Western Harbour Tunnel and the Northern Beaches Link should immediately cease. As North Sydney's federal member, I would see my role as being to actually work with the local councils and to put pressure then on the state government and to leverage whatever federal funding is being provided to that project to put a hold on it until a complete assessment of all viable alternatives has actually been done. I was actually speaking a little bit before we started tonight to a gentleman, and he asked me similarly, you know, where do you stand on the Northern Beaches Link? And my comment to him is, it actually beggars belief to me that we are in the year 2022, we are pursuing a public transport project that was recommended in 1960. It's just insane. So I fundamentally believe that both the North Sydney and the Willoughby community have been overlooked in this process. I think they've been ignored because we have been safe for so long, and the project, basically we are carrying all the pain for none of the gain when it comes to this project. So I think that we should be holding it to account and asking them to show us where is the analysis on what you did in terms of a public transport link with the subway, for example, versus cars. We all know cars are not the future of our city, you know, and so to be building even 3-lane highways going in opposite directions is just completely counterintuitive to where we want to be moving as a nation. So I'd like to see the work on, you know, what happened with the light rail link from Chatswood straight out to DY. Is that not an option? Why are we doing this? The loss of the trees, unacceptable. We're talking about 1,500 trees, mature trees. Yeah, it's more, and then, well, like that, someone did say to me the other day, it's over 3,000 across the entire project. So 1,500 just on Camaray Park. It means, what's interesting is that, and I'm pretty sure that people actually in the Northern Beaches, I'm not sure that they're particularly got a lot of love for this project at the moment either, because we now know that it will increase traffic on their peninsula. You know, I think it's somewhere between a 12 to 16% increase in traffic on their side. And from our side, it will add somewhere between 12 and 16 minutes to just the route getting through North Sydney. So this project is ill thought through, and I think it's actually actually where we need a very brave government to stand up and say, yep, okay, we can do better. So what do we do now to actually do better? And to your point, there is no public statement on how much money is being put to this project by the federal government. So the other one of my key policies is to demand that the federal government and the Prime Minister tell us how much money has been committed from the federal purse and on what basis that money was committed. So where's the business case and where's the criteria that this project met to make it fundable? And then my argument would be that that funding should be suspended and withheld until we have a solution that meets the needs of not just this community now, but more importantly, the community that we're expecting to be living here at 2100, which is, I think, the real question.
Hi, Kylie. I'd preface this by saying I hope you do very well. And it's going to be a tough question, I think, and I'm not a liberal plant, but the demographic and the distribution of people here is not particularly diverse. And I'm probably one of the youngest people here. And I think...
Are you giving yourself a bit of a rap there?
Well, it's not a diverse group here. And I think Ian asked a question earlier, which was absolutely spot on. You mentioned about saving the environment for our children, and that's a given now for anyone who's rational. But the affordability of housing and the way that the social structure is developing, there's no one here who is to speak for them on that subject, but it's out of control. And I think you've answered every question well, but to say I don't have the answers, I think is something you need to have the answers. So you need to have an answer for negative gearing, and maybe it's that you think it's good and you keep it, but you've got to have an answer on that. You've got to have an answer for houses which are dotted all around this suburb, which are empty for 8 months of the year. I mean, it's really out of control now, and I just think that even if we do save the planet, we get to net zero in 2050, the whole fabric of society is broken now around what's affordable for our kids and where we can live going forwards, and this is going to become a retirement home.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think, so what I just heard you say, and I think it's really important that I reiterate that I've heard what you've just said, is that we do want to have a statement around housing affordability for the federal seat of North Sydney. We want to be clear on what our opinion is and what we're going to be advocating for. And so on that basis, I would really invite you guys, please, to come to connect with me in the campaign headquarters in Crow's Nest and have a conversation with me around the things you want to see me advocating for. I mean, I know in the last federal election, things like negative gearing and franking credits, that was a massive battleground between the major parties, yeah? Interestingly, it's not being raised at all from what I've seen yet in this election. I don't know whether that's a deliberate strategy. I would love to have that conversation with you, because I obviously have my own personal opinion, but if I go full circle, it's not my personal opinion that matters. It's the opinion of our community that matters. And I'm more than happy to facilitate a conversation around that topic.
No, Kylie.
Oh, and so just to the younger, to answer the younger demographic piece, so there is a whole other group called KT Next Gen. And so anyone who connects with this campaign under the age of 30 actually has the option to connect with KT Next Gen. Yeah, clearly you've come to the wrong meeting. What I can say actually is that's a group that I'm really actively involved in. So we meet every Tuesday night. I sit and listen to them. In fact, I'm going with them to Mardi Gras next Saturday. If anybody would like to come with me, you're very welcome. But you're right, they've got very firm opinions, and I am listening. I'm listening. Ian just wants to, can I just come back here for that one point? Hang on. Sorry, Trine.
No, I think it's very important that you take on board some policies to perhaps consider to fight this housing affordability crisis issue. And I'd be happy to come along and have a chat to you at Crow's Nest and give you my thoughts. I've been in real estate for 40 years and I can just see the issue getting worse and worse and worse. And unless you'd like to have your children grow up for the next 20 years in your home, I think you need to give some serious thought to some policies on how this is going to pan out.
You're in. I'll take it.
Hi, Kylie. Stuart here from Castlecrag. I was listening a couple of days ago to the speech by Christine Holgate at the CEO Award, which was fantastic. And I've had the privilege the last couple of years of working for this really, really great female leader. And watching Christine Holgate talk about how she ran businesses, etc., and then comparing that to, the federal government, parliament, and federal parliament, not the government. And so I know that that's one of your main themes, but what thoughts do you have about how to change that culture so as well as yourself, that there can be other, really, really powerful, really great women that can contribute?
Yeah, actually I'm really excited, Christine. So this Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. I'm doing a breakfast for International Women's Day, and actually Christine Holgate is going to join us that morning to talk on a panel with Catherine Fox is emceeing it, Georgie Dent is joining her, and then we have Jack Jacobs as a man on the panel. Sorry, I can't think of a better way to say that at the moment. There should be a better way, but I just can't think of it. I think what's really important about toxic cultures is that you have to disrupt them by putting people within them who are not afraid to actually stand up and call them out. I've worked for 35 years in all sorts of organisations, and I could probably tell you stories that would make your toes curl in terms of some of the things that I've had people say to me along the way. Things from, a very highly regarded and well-respected gentleman who is still the chair on a number of boards. I worked with him at one stage and he told me he'd never met a woman who was worth her chair at a board table. I've had one CEO, when I told him I was pregnant with my third child, basically say to me, do you not get off your back, Tink? To which, so I think to say that the behaviour we're seeing in Canberra is isolated to Canberra is not true. I do think that we do still have systemic issues in our country in terms of how we relate in the workplace. But I fundamentally believe that until we get some very straightforward changes into that house in Canberra, we're not going to see anything change. I think alcohol needs to be taken out of the building. I think we need to increase the number of women in the building. And I actually think that independents play a really important role in that. And people that I've already spoken to, Zali, Helen, Kathy McGowan, they actually tell me that as an independent, they don't experience the same sort of thing that some of the women experience in parties, because there's not as many closed doors where discussions are being had. So I think it's a really healthy thing, and I'm not naive, and I'm not for a minute thinking it's going to be easy, because this is a cultural change, and culture is one of the hardest things to change. But I do know that you've got to start somewhere. And if we can start in this next election and then build in the one after that and build in the one after that, I'm really hopeful that there's somebody in this room who actually is currently raising perhaps the first female Prime Minister for this country who's voted in her own right. You've got 3 of them. Okay. Second. Oh, yeah, well, I mean voted in. Yeah, voted in. Sorry. I have nothing but respect for Julia Gillard, but the first voted in female Prime Minister, I hope to see that in the next few years. Yeah.
Hello, my name's Angela. I live in Narembeen. First time listening to you speak, but can you kindly elaborate on who your financial backers are?
Yeah, very happy to. So as an independent, I don't have any set financial backers. I don't have a campaign bank that I can get into. So over 1,000 people have donated to the campaign so far, which has been fascinating. And the most common gift amount is the $100 tag amount. So lots of people being very generous and giving me $100. There are some people who have had the capacity to give more. So the single largest gift I've received from an individual is $25,000. That was from one family. I then have Climate 200 is a body that I can go to and apply to for funding when I require it. So I have asked for funding from them on 3 occasions now, and each time I've gone to them and asked for that funding, I've done so on the basis that I was using it to try and generate matched giving. So I went and asked, look, will you, if I raise $50,000, will you use your donor money to match the $50,000 that I've raised? So we've been incredibly, I think the response from the community to this campaign has been incredibly encouraging. And so in total, we've raised around about $670,000, am I right, Treen? To date, so in 6 months, and that is phenomenal. We do know when we first looked at this starting, we worked out that we needed a minimum of around about $750,000 to be able to get through to an election. That was when we were still expecting an election in March, so it's blown out a little bit since then. But I'm not going to let money be the reason I don't get in. I don't have salary or anything. I'm not taking anything out of the campaign. My campaign managers are completely voluntary. Most of the people attached to the campaign are volunteers. I think we currently have 4 paid staff that are associated with the campaign. The rest are all volunteers. So it's a really incredible community to be a part of at the moment. And there's no, I'm sure, I've not been in politics, but I'm not naive. I know that there will be muckraking and insinuation about, who's doing what and when, but there's no big, magic money behind me. And to be clear, I didn't know Simon Holmes-A-Court when I launched as a candidate. I'd never met him. He was somebody that I met after I decided to run, and that was on my terms. I reached out to him to introduce myself.
Just since you've raised the ugly matter of money, let me point out to you the merchandise table. Because every dollar helps, and like our sister here, I can see that many of you have got your pink t-shirt in the wash, which is all the more reason to get a second one, so that you can avoid that. I personally have 15. I like to change them morning and evening and have a spare in the car. You can get a cap. A bandana for your dog. My dog loves it. There are core flutes that you can put up outside your house. I've got one. And such is the respect with which Kylea is already held. I've had to pencil glasses and a moustache on it myself. Because no one else in the street's game to. So I would urge you to, as you're strolling out, as you're there, drop a couple of bucks and get a t-shirt. You can wear it pink. Pink will take you anywhere, believe me. It's good for casual wear, it's good for formal wear. I wore it at my mother-in-law's funeral, it was a hit. So it's crass, I know, but every dollar helps, and so if you're in the position to be able to drop a couple of bucks, that'd be great. Yes, Kylea, you can say one more thing.
I promise I'll be really, really fast. So thank you, Lex. Thank you. Thank you so much for your help today. Yeah, big round of applause for Lex. So if there was 2 things that I could leave you with this afternoon. Number 1 would be, if you are at all interested, if what you've heard today has sparked in you a desire to know more about who we are, please go online to kyleatink.com.au and subscribe to receive our newsletters, to stay up to date with what's happening. There are actually some volunteers in the room today who have iPads who will very happily subscribe you today. I'll let you in on a secret, and that is if you actually go on and and indicate that you'd be happy to volunteer to support the campaign. Once your name goes into the volunteer channel, you actually get a T-shirt for free. Sorry, Lex. So if you're, and actually here's the kicker, wearing the T-shirt counts as volunteering. So, you know, it's just a matter of getting out there. So please, this really is, at the end of the day, a community movement and a grassroots movement. And the final thing I would ask you then is, if anything you've heard today has moved you to the point that you feel like you want to be part of changing the way politics is done in Australia, please think about your friends and family, talk to your friends and family, ask them what their opinions are on where we're headed at the moment, and invite them to become a part of this, because that's what we're all about. So, and I think together we can change the climate in Canberra, and that's what we're setting out to do. So thank you again for giving me your time this afternoon.
Authorised by Kylea Tink, North Sydney, New South Wales.